tested. So folks that kind of aren't here today, I know we're going to talk about some of the disciplines you all care about, but really this is going to be an overview of the whole federal landscape, federal funding, some congressional overlooks right now, but then a little bit of deep dives into federal agencies. So this is going to be a little bit more at the top level, but again, hopefully for you all in this room, the folks online, we'll take a Q&A at the end. This could be some really helpful overview of this very diverse landscape. So again, we are at Lewis Burke Associates. We are UVA's federal relations partners out in Washington. So we are a nonprofit government relations lobbying firm out in Washington, and it's not just Jack and I, there's 28 of us. And we have different expertise kind of around a range of issues. So if you would imagine all of UVA's needs right now, we have folks that work on the higher education front, so primarily student aid, student loan issues with the President's office. But in addition, we also have parochial research experts kind of across the board. So I actually do quite a bit of work in social behavioral sciences, but also a lot of domestic security issues. We also have folks who do just a ton of work at the Department of Energy areas who serve in the Appropriations Committee for that. So we had to hear kind of their pitches for funding and why it's important. So he has this encyclopedic memory and gave us a bit of a download ahead of this, but also folks in defense and kind of across the board. So we work directly with the President's office, and John Bowen with the President's office, but we're also available to really anybody at the university. We interfaced recently with Phil Bourne, kind of as they really build out the data school and kind of identify priorities, but we're also happy to work with individual faculty members on kind of where they're thinking with their research and what possible federal avenues are out there and kind of where to look. And finally, we represent UVA with the federal delegation, so the congressional delegation rather. So, we maintain strong relationships with the parochial committees that they're on. We are aware of the issues that they care about, and that can be beneficial for a few folds. I think it can be beneficial for you all if there's opportunities, of course, to testify, to actually use your knowledge for evidence-based policymaking if it's more applied, but also, and I think fundamentally, for us to also prioritize our asks as well. So when it comes to federal funding time, it's really important that our members know that we are experts, we are here, we are able to help out in Congress. So types of activities, again, I think I went over quite a bit of them. One thing that's really important that we do is that we provide actionable intelligence. So we are really on the pulse of really where a lot of new federal funding opportunities are coming from, and not just that, kind of pre-decisional information as well. So we attend federal advisory committees for different offices within different agencies. We kind of hear about the prioritization on the front end. We actually track the different reports that they have to make on different priorities. We kind of map that out for UVA and your researchers. We kind of find these different streams that could really best suit either, again, individual resources or larger contingencies within campus as they're prioritizing kind of what to go after. We can do surveys of the federal landscape as well, and again, foster relationships with program officers within federal agencies. So for instance, at National Science Foundation, we have strong relationships with different assistant directors, social directors within different disciplines, but also several program directors, and we're able to facilitate some conversations. And not only that, if you're not familiar with a certain agency, which I think this is great, this building can attest through it, all the pan-university convergence, aptitude here at UVA, we can really help you interface with program officers. So kind of demystify what this office is looking for, what it's like to meet with them, when it's a good time and when it's not a good time to meet with them. Some offices are way more cagey than others, and that kind of goes back to the nature of the agency. So we're a resource for you all to help out. And again, best practices for working with us is just really, we can help strategic planning. So if you're running or part of a larger cohort, I think that's quite useful. I know that there's, again, a lot of that here at UVA, and you're kind of stuck and you think that you have a great application or a great basic research for us that you'd like to explore. We can really help you out. But of course, we can also work with individuals, help you develop white papers, and really just set up side calls where we can hear a little bit more about your work, we can get the right experts in the room, and we can kind of target some strategies for you. So, I think it's a really important point because, again, there's 28 policy experts at UVA. Jack and I are far from experts on everything. so if there's somebody, again, who, so let's just say high energy physics expert, we would bring in maybe 2 or 3 different people depending on what the application is for that particular conversation, that type of phone call. And we're happy to share, again, those resources with you kind of across the spectrum. So just a little bit about the political landscape in Washington. It's chaotic. I think you all get the same kind of news as we do. But I think hopefully in this talk, just we could briefly kind of go over really what the signal is for the research community outside of all the noise going on. So there's a lot of broader impacts of what you'll be getting on your phone alerts. As you know, that things are not actually, I think that it wouldn't really get reported, but things aren't really too bad right now as far as federal funding for research. Obviously, it's not exactly where it needs to be fully competitive, I think, but all things considered, it's been steadily rising for a lot of key agencies. And the last couple of years have been pretty good for us. I think the community has done a really good job. While there's been this strong partisan divide in Washington, kind of making sure that prioritization is still given to research and development. The Trump administration, I'm going to go over this in a little bit, has established an Office of Science. They've laid out some very broad research priorities. And among them is, of course, artificial intelligence and machine learning for this group. But of course, STEM education, opioids, kind of things across the board that you would imagine would be of interest. But they are starting to prioritize these things and really map it out to federal agencies. And we have a strong Office of Science, Technology, and Policy Advisor, so OSTP. So this would be the chief scientist within the White House, and it's Kelvin Drogemeyer from the University of Oklahoma. He is a computational engineer, is that right? Scientist. But anyway,
he's a weather researcher.
Yes, right. But the bottom line being is that he's one of us. He gets it. He understands the importance of university partnerships in solving national needs. It was a tremendous hire, and we didn't have any problems with it. So it was a thing that we were kind of, pins and needles. We didn't know where it was going to go for the chief scientist, but it was a very welcome choice, and he's a very strong speaker to the importance of universities for competitiveness. But of course, there are challenges. I think this one could be a lot more bullets, but I think, the 2020 election is going to have very interesting implications kind of across the board. Right now, it's kind of really slowed things in Congress, clearly. Quite a few senators are running for president. There's going to be a massive, obviously, campaign for the House races. So a lot of momentum had started with the new Congress in, new science and technology policies, new funding opportunities, but it's really, really slowed down, kind of leading up to the election. Plus other distractions, which aren't trivial, but the impeachment inquiry has really kind of put the brakes on quite a few important hearings. For instance, I was going to one of the future of work from the House Science Committee, which is a fascinating topic, obviously, and it covers so many different areas. But there was about 3 people in the room because it was the same time apparently that Speaker Pelosi was announcing that they were going to look into impeaching the president. So completely empty, and I checked my phone later. It was very interesting. But there's still different areas where the disruption is in the federal workforce is also very challenging. I think that there has been some butting heads between the administration and Congress and how that should be funded. We're seeing some positions go unfilled. Partial government shutdowns do not help that. Right now, funding for the government, we'll talk in a little bit, could expire within a few weeks now, so November 21st. But the disruption at federal agencies could mean that, and has meant in some cases, that you'll have either unfilled positions, a lot of acting directors, you'll have some folks covering broader portfolios than they're used to. This could be challenges in getting feedback, follow-up. We're kind of aware of what some of these offices are and kind of what to look out for. Again, it's touch and go, but I think patience is really important. And so these are some of the broader impacts, some of the things you're hearing in the news, that the kind of current disruption right now is pervasive. However, all of this could change in some way within the next, say, year and a half, really depending on this next election. And we'll see where it goes. But as well as far as federal funding for research and development, it's been pretty steady. It's looked pretty good, and we've tried to avoid a lot of the major spending cuts. They've reached bipartisan deals, but the really important thing is this trending arrow at the very top to show the bipartisan budget agreement and what it really kind of could have been. So again, right now we don't know what's going to happen with for the government. November 21st is when it's supposed to expire. They had a small contained resolution. We could see some agencies get funded with a boost, but we could also see a full year contained resolution where it would just be the same funding levels as before. And contained resolutions, especially short-term ones, are very challenging for agency directors because there's just that strong lack of certainty. So if even if it's a full year CR, then they have trouble funding new programs, they have trouble implementing any of the stronger things that were laid out in recent budget proposals. So there was some strong capacity building in certain agencies that might just not happen if you're taking the same money as before. However, the same money before is way better than a drastic cut in funding. So it's kind of a, if that's the best that can happen, it's not the worst thing that can happen. But again, these disruptions can be really challenging. We see some agencies, again, holding back some funding.
What's CR?
Contained resolution. So right now, the funding was supposed to expire for the government on September 30th at the end of the fiscal year. And they just punted it for a few months to November 21st. And when they do that, it's a contained resolution. So they just take the funding that they had before and they just extend it. So otherwise, under normal process, they would have different appropriations bills. So say one would fund, things that include the NIH, Department of Education. There's one that includes Commerce, Justice, and Science agencies. And they would try to pass those bills through Congress. The president would sign something, and then within those bills, it not only has funding allocations, but it has congressional priorities for different areas. So it's really important kind of for agency direction that they get those. But if there's a CR, it's kind of it's the same priorities as before, it's the same funding as before, it's the same levels as before. But again, it's not the worst thing that could possibly happen, but it's kind of stifles innovation. So this is a really, really wordy slide, but again, it just shows that there are strong priorities at OSTP, Office of Science, Technology Policy, in the White House for us in this room and for us, streaming. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to continue to be a strong priority. I mean, it's going to be in areas that kind of cover, they mentioned workforce, ethics, competitiveness, basic research. Obviously, quantum is a strong area of interest. And leveraging data science for productivity, for advancement, really across the board. So again, these are very, very broad themes, but it just kind of illustrates that there is a direction, at least somewhat, within the White House on kind of where these main research thrusts should be kind of across federal agencies. I think we'll make these available either online or we'll send them around. And again, these are just newer expanded areas, but I think the important thing to note is that data can really apply to almost all of these. So there's a social behavioral sciences plus X, but that could also very easily be applied to data sciences plus X. So data sciences plus mental health and aging populations. It could be data science plus, of course, the obvious ones like imaging and systems bio, but also autonomous systems, workforce, and the impacts of that. So it's a really, really good time to have a major initiative in data sciences. I think that's pretty clear. And it's an area that is not tired. I think that there is a strong interest, and we'll talk about the different federal agency thrusts and priorities in this space, but in making sure that A, we're getting the most out of our data, but B, we're really investing in the right areas to move forward based on our needs as a nation, and again, to maintain competitiveness with other countries who are heavily investing this as well, namely China. So it's a good spot to be, it's a good presentation, and I'm going to turn over to Jack, who's going to kick us off.
Quick question. So I haven't seen 4D printing before. What's that?
4D printing, it's printing, I mean, it's simply printing that's not rigid structures, things that can move or change over time, things like that. So
is this already an established field?
Well, it's one of the areas that I think some of the agencies, especially DoD, is very interested in this space. And there's materials element to it as well. But yeah, so getting into some of the agency priorities in data science. So we're going to kick it off with the National Science Foundation. NSF really likes to consider itself one of the main homes of data science, AI, machine learning research in the federal government. Over the last couple of years, a lot of the work at NSF the sort of overall strategic vision has been focused around the 10 big ideas for future investment, which laid out 10 areas which NSF is making sort of big bets in and large investments in, including the harnessing the data revolution, future of work at the human technology frontier, and a lot of other areas where data science has played and is expected to continue to play a big role. Harnessing the data revolution, HDR, is obviously the most applicable to data science. And it's really focused on foundational advances in data science, in AI machine learning, to sort of enable transformational discoveries in science and engineering down the road. And that includes both research, education, and workforce, as well as data infrastructure. But that's not the only place that data plays a role. You have big ideas like understanding the rules of life, windows of the universe, navigating the new Arctic, which all rely on data science, especially for modeling and simulation activities. The big ideas have really been pushed by NSF Director Franz Cordova. It's like one of her signature initiatives. And so the future of the big ideas are a little bit unclear with her term ending in March of next year. But NSF is already planning on the future of the big ideas, what comes next, through the NSF 2026 initiative. They've solicited feedback on what some of the new big ideas can be that they're planning on rolling out soon, that are expected to be 5 or 10-year plans. We expect to see them in some of the areas that are not touched by the current big ideas on the side there, including things like environmental resilience or climate. But we will see what those end up being. NSF is also very focused recently on partnerships. They've been forming a lot of industry partnerships with Amazon, Boeing, as well as other federal agencies, including the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to sort of address some of these cross-agency, interdisciplinary questions on things like fairness in AI and ethics. As I mentioned, there's some leadership changes that have happened or are coming at NSF. Franz Cordova's term ends in March 2020, and so they'll start looking for a new NSF director, as well as the Computer and Information Sciences and Engineering Director at SIZE. Their AD, Jim Carosa, is just leaving, and they have named Margaret Martinosi, who's the current advisory committee chair for SIZE, as the new assistant director, who will be starting in February of next year. One of the other things that we've been tracking is that Congress is going to start looking to reauthorize the National Science Foundation sometime later this year or early next year, basically writing a large bill that will lay out some of the policy priorities and areas that Congress wants NSF to make strong investments in, as well as potentially granting new authority for more interagency collaborations, industry partnerships. So we're tracking that, and would love to get any feedback on ideas or issues that you have regarding NSF. But looking specifically at some of the funding opportunities currently and in the future. So as I mentioned, harnessing the data revolution is a major area of focus for NSF. They have competed and awarded their tripods institutes. I don't remember the specific acronym, but translational research in something data science. These are sort of the fundamental research focusing on math, developing AI, algorithmic, and systems approaches to data science. UVA has one. And they're also now expanding into Tripods plus X. So these are a program where you partner with an existing Tripods institution and use the foundational discoveries in data science that they've been, tools and methodologies they've been working on, and apply them to a new field, whether it's health or transportation, smart cities, more of the interdisciplinary focus. And that's something, the interdisciplinary focus is something that NSF has been investing heavily in. There's also the DI RISE Institutes, which similarly focus on the sharing of data for sort of these data-intensive convergence research, bringing multiple fields or multiple areas of study together, as well as the NSF-wide convergence accelerators, a very similar topic, less of a focus on data-intensive research, but data science obviously plays a big role there. One of the other things that I want to mention was in HDR was the data science core. So this is a program that NSF is running that focuses on developing the data science workforce, both people who, future researchers in data science, but also how do we ensure that workers across different fields, especially in government and public service, have access to and knowledge about data science methods and implementing it in their work. The early 2019 solicitation focused specifically on undergraduates, but they said this solicitation focuses, for the beginning of this program, this solicitation focuses on undergraduates, meaning that we could see future solicitations focused on graduate students, continuing education, or other populations. Really quickly running through, there are a lot of opportunities in data science at NSF, so running through some of them quickly. AI Institutes is a new solicitation that was just released recently by NSF. It addresses both sort of the horizontal, sort of the foundational areas around algorithms and ethics, fairness in AI, bias, but then also the interdisciplinary tracks. They have one on foundations of machine learning, trustworthiness in AI, agriculture, augmented learning through AI, as well as several other areas. So the long and short of it is there are a lot of opportunities at NSF. They're making a major play in data science, and so it's a good time to get involved. Okay, so moving on to the National Institutes of Health. There's a common misconception that we hear a lot that because NIH doesn't have any of these sort of large cross-agency initiatives the same way that NSF does, that there's not a lot going on in data science at NIH, which is not the case. There is a lot of things going on, but it's sort of fragmented across the 27 institutes and centers that they have, where each one is sort of, making its own play or investing in its own research. NIH recently hired a new associate director for data science, Susan Gregor, who the position has been open since the School of Data Science's own Phil Boren left. And so it's a little bit silly to be talking about NIH when the School of Data Science has probably the preeminent expert on data science research at NIH. But they are working on trying to create a more overarching strategy for NIH. They released the NIH Strategic Plan for Data Science June of last year, and the advisory council to the director has a working group on artificial intelligence, expected to release their final reports before the end of this year, outlining several recommendations of things that the Office of the Director and NIH as a whole can do to make sure that NIH's investment in data science is strategic and collaborative. So some of the funding opportunities that they currently are funding that are, as I mentioned, scattered across several of the different institutes and centers. One of the largest one of the largest centers or centers that's most focused on data science will be NIBIB, the National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. They do have a priority in quantitative data science modeling and computation. There have also been some very preliminary conversations that have been going on between the NSF Engineering Directorate and NIBIB about potential joint activities there. So that's something that we might expect to see coming next year. The National Cancer Institute has programs looking at childhood cancer data and how it can be used for treatment. Their program at the National Institute of Mental Health on computational psychiatry. Their sort of initiatives spread all over. Two things that I'll mention that aren't necessarily funding but are activities ongoing at NIH is the STRIDES initiative, a partnership to make sure that cloud services are accessible to biomedical researchers, and that NIH-funded researchers have access to those cloud support services. The National Library of Medicine is also leading the Big Data to Knowledge initiative, which is focused around ensuring that NIH and the federal government writ large has standards and best practices in place for data sharing, how data should be formatted to enable data sharing across different, across different sources, but also across different fields, and ensuring that those best practices are disseminated. You can just see a data point. NIH has invested $300 million on AI in the last fiscal year alone, and they're continuing to look at some of the ways that AI can play into other spaces, including genomics, microbiome, diagnostics, and text mining using electronic health records. One thing I'll mention, because I know that we have someone who's working on clinical analytics, it's not mentioned in the slideshow, is that also in HHS, ARC, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, has made a large play in this space. The director, Gopal Khanna, is very, very interested in using data for predictive analytics, specifically in diagnoses, and has made it one of the agency's priorities to better use data to basically reduce misdiagnosis, as well as to just sort of broadly improve outcomes. And so that's another priority for them as well.
Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
On that, do you know if they are they doing anything around cultivating the data sets that would be kind of standard to do that kind of work, or is that kind of its own kind of outside the school of what they're facilitating?
So ARC is a little bit strange among federal funding agencies. A lot of their priorities are funded through challenges and like challenge grants. So a lot of times it's sort of we'll give you funding if you come up with a solution, but how you get there is on you. But I'm not aware specifically of any work in terms of putting together the data sources, but they issue, they also work a lot through special emphasis notices, where they'll say this is our priority and we're willing to hear proposals that you have on how to get there. So we can talk later, but I would recommend looking at some of those special emphasis notices and seeing if there's a way that, I mean, they operate a lot through investigator-initiated research, so taking it to them and saying this is related to this area that I know that you're interested in, I think can get you far. There's not, one of the difficulties with ARC is they don't have a ton of money, and there's some congressional authorization issues that mean that number might actually go down rather than up, but we can talk about that more afterwards if you have specific questions. But yes, I'm going to hand it back over to Bill to talk about DoD.
Okay, so where to start with DoD? I think that this is kind of the beginning of the, I guess it's a continuation of NIH, but NIH is such a larger scale. But the data sciences plus X kind of domain that we kind of talked about a little bit earlier. So this is data sciences plus everything that DoD cares about. So get used to this trend. It's going to be data sciences plus the things that these different agencies care about. And in this case, it's going to be defense installations and maintenance and efficiencies and the warfighter. So helping actual warfare, helping within theaters and within major concerns that the defense either workforce and community is facing, but also, again, ways we can improve processes and efficiencies. So it's an area where they're kind of still really prioritizing where they want to go next in this area, but thankfully they had this big strategic plan, came out February 12th, that focused on technologies of operations, and from that, the centerpiece of it was the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, the JAIC. So what the JAIC is going to be is this major coordinating body that really brings together DoD operations, and in some cases research priorities, in artificial intelligence and machine learning toward different cross-platform concerns. So what that kind of has looked like is that they've prioritized some topics, as you can imagine, in predictive systems maintenance, but also in some areas like, say, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. So what they're trying to do is find different areas where there could be cross-platform, really across Army, Navy, etc., understanding and needs and kind of addressing those. Now, that's not to say that there aren't still basic research thrusts within Army, Navy, and the Air Force, that they have to do basic research officers, which we can connect you to the right program officers in those different areas. And sometimes it might surprise you really, who covers what. There's kind of not the most rhyme or reason to it. For instance, I was speaking to someone after a presentation earlier who did some work on social media mapping and adversarial conduct. So, for instance, obviously the 2016 election and manipulating Twitter, but doing some text searches and finding out over time how tactics have changed from the adversary. So,
How fast what?
sorry?
How fast what from the adversary?
How tactics are changing over time. So
Tactics.
how their strategies are shifting when they're doing these Twitter campaigns for misinformation or to play different partisan divides off of each other. They are focusing more on the main Internet Research Authority within Russia. What was it called? Agency, that's right. And specifically within that realm, based on their disinformation and manipulation campaigns, how they've kind of changed over time. And the bottom line being is that there is a program for it. There's a few actually. One of them is Minerva, which is discussed up here, which is the main social behavioral sciences program within the Department of Defense that kind of addresses different parochial concerns for DoD. So say, for instance, they want information, these topics change every year, on why somebody would commit a cyber attack in a certain way from a certain community. So one of the topics was actually on, and this is just an example to kind of illustrate the point of the different avenues of the Department of Defense. One of them was on these disruption social media campaigns in the Indo-Pacific region. Department of Defense knows that China and Russia is doing things here. They are kind of understanding why, but it takes a stronger knowledge of kind of the cultural divisions that they're trying to play off of within these regions and kind of where they might go next. So say here,
Where they might go next.
where say these Russia or China might propagate these tensions, right? So say here in the 2016 election, if you were to propagate disunion among Americans, there were several issues that you could just pick from, guns, for instance, and let's just use that for an example, that they would specifically play off different groups from each other to create disruption. So what is the gun control issue of these regions? How is the data being manipulated? How is it going out? How does it change over time? So there's funding within this particular region from the Minerva program. So again, that's one that's mostly social sciences, but just kind of shows how data is pervasive through everything at DoD. But also the Office of Navy Research is a program officer there that has kind of been tasked with this field of social media manipulation that you could submit a quad chart to or a white paper and start a conversation with the work you're on, and then they could maybe help you find DoD funding. So that's just one very specific example. But again, AI and machine learning is a huge driver throughout the agency. And each office kind of has their own priorities that are kind of be set by the JIC, kind of going forward.
Are you? Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, some of these things are you skipping back and forth between the actual stuff in the field or the cyber world?
Sorry?
I'm trying to figure out.
Oh no, that's all right. This is the challenge when it comes to like explaining DoD's interest in this space because it's so broad. They consider that to be some type of warfare. So international cyber attacks is a type of warfare. So that's addressing that type of thing.
Is all what you've said for the last 5 or 6 minutes, 10 minutes, have you touched on the physical soldier in the field
Yes.
with the rifle?
It does as well, though. What they're looking at, this is an important component to this when it comes to warfare, is I would say the main thrust of that is human-machine teaming. So not only having these great technologies, but how humans use them. They're not in the interest of replacing soldiers anytime soon. And they want to look at, this is a bit more in the social science kind of context, but also, of course, great convergence topic here, how humans can interact with the top machinery, how they can avoid maybe being manipulated if they're in a desk job, maybe at the Pentagon, and really finding out new research and new technologies that think about human use on the front end. So that's kind of another area of emphasis. So the warfighter kind of being general, is not really going away, but actually as a human, in that context, they're still looking for ways to support them, to make sure that if there is a new tool, if there's a new AI capability, that they can work alongside this machine. So human-machine interaction is a huge priority, but not so much that this machine would replace the human, if that kind of makes sense.
I'm not worried about the replacement. I'm trying to figure out, soldier on the ground, what does he get? What's a tangible thing that he gets? It's communication.
It could be communication. It could be improved facilities within the Pentagon. So if you look at how they're using the vast data sets that they have at DoD to improve, there's, for instance, I think one of the ones of these cross-data things is predictive health. So soldier suicide is a big issue. So what they can do based on, I would say, I mean, it's a new and emerging area that they really haven't completely scoped out, but theoretically, based on what they have about different soldier, again, suicides or health risks, what they could find from predictive analytics, from data science to support the warfighter. So at the end of the day, again, this is improving intelligence for the warfighter. This is improving operations and decision making.
Are drones included?
Absolutely, across the board. But yeah, it would be helping on the battlefield, in the cyber battlefield, so physical and cyber. But another one is, finding new ways to map out decisions, maybe before a perceptive battle happens. So almost like game theory as well. So if this, then that. If this, then that, as best as possible. So they're still trying to prioritize these different areas, but the JAIC, I think, is a good start in doing that, just Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, and finding ways where there's some cross-platform things. So one sector's not, Air Force is doing one thing that Navy's not, that, et cetera, et cetera. So they're trying to make sure that everyone's kind of playing on the same team, and they're going to invest heavily in this, in finding eventually new industry, university, Army lab partnerships to advance their research interests, but it's really across the board.
What part of DoD would be interested in funding the predictive analytics around things like soldier suicide or soldier health problems?
I think that's going to be driven primarily, again, by the JAIC, but I can...
So JAIC again, sorry.
Yeah, JAIC again, I know. But
JAIC stands for...
The Joint AI Center.
yeah. But again, there are also different Army offices that have to deal with more health concerns as well. And this is one thing that if you do research in this space, in particular, and you want a better answer, please let me know. And we have actual stronger experts in our office who kind of cover this.
Yeah, the DoD has actually a large health portfolio, and through various health programs, both in the services as well as sort of in the Pentagon Central Committee. And we have an expert who knows every part of health funding at DoD and what they are interested in. So we're happy to talk about this.
And then just again, here's some like basic kind of new funding opportunities. They all have their own broad agency announcements with different funding opportunities. I will just say that DARPA has taken a very strong interest in this, as they tend to. I think they have about $2 billion in their AI Next program. So what this is going to be is focusing on ongoing AI issues and research programs, but also kind of what's next. What's too really risky for even, say industry to be able to have capabilities in. So they're looking at areas like really kind of the next wave. So AI that can kind of understand, reasoning. It can understand context of things. I think that's one challenge for AI, is that humans have the advantage of creativity, of being able to understand situations and adapt to them, and understand different environments and adapt to them. And it's kind of tipping that balance the other way and finding research that does that. So it's one area that DARPA is really looking at. And of course, they have these different industry days, which I will encourage you all to kind of take a look at, and just take a look at the agenda and who's speaking, what the topics are. I think those are really good ways to kind of broaden understanding of these different concerns and interests and really who's in the room, and it can inform solicitation going forward. So that's an important way to get engaged before these topics even come out. That's one thing that we do track as a firm. And then Department of Energy, again, this is a strong AI plus, data science plus what the agency cares about. So for them, it would be data science plus basic energy sciences. So areas like, physics, biology, chemistry, modeling, simulation as well. They care about high energy computing. They care about energy systems. So this could be grids. They care about really, just those kind of standard environments that they've cared about for years, but now they're trying to apply more data sciences to that, and primarily artificial intelligence. So the good news about this is that they recently released a report on it. They're kind of actively prioritizing what they want to fund. For the basic research component, they've identified the basic research needs within machine learning, which again includes things like interoperability, massive scientific data analysis. There's a strong interest in advanced mathematics toward these ends, multi-scale modeling and algorithms. So again, DOE has a ton of data through their installations and through their ongoing research activities, and they want to find a way to use it and advance it more so than I would say NSF, which is a lot more basic. So this is a lot more applied and focused, but also kind of similar to the basic science realm.
And I'll just add in that a lot of the other mission departments and mission agencies are very interested. They have a lot of interest in collaborating with DOE, since DOE has the most advanced computing and high-power computing infrastructure in the federal government. So there's a lot of interest from, Department of Health and Human Services or others in working with DOE.
Yep. And again, they also have these town halls on artificial intelligence, which a report's going to come out in December, but I think it was like over 1,000 scientists over the 4 town halls. And again, this is going to really kind of match a bit more of their applied side on artificial intelligence and what sectors they're going to want to focus on, where they're really going to want to invest quite a bit of their money, and they're going to try to design a roadmap from that going forward. And again, just an overview of some of the funding opportunities. We're hoping to see quite a bit more again in fundamental research. So basic mathematics, we think is going to be a big area. We think they're going to do a lot more when it comes to hardware and software technologies, which again, systems integration is a big deal for the Department of Energy and will continue to be, as well as some Earth system modeling. So this is going to be advanced climate and Earth systems monitoring and data integration, and as well as fusion sciences and plasma physics, and kind of the more applied for energy thrusts.
All right, so now we're getting into the agencies that have sort of smaller research funding or less direct ties to data science. And so I'm going to try and run through these relatively quickly so we can make sure we have some time for questions and discussion at the end. The Department of Education funds most of its research through the Institute of Educational Sciences, or IES. They have a new director as of last year, Mark Schneider, who's pushing a lot more use of making sure that the research that IES puts out is usable among practitioners, among teachers, and educators at large. They also have a recent focus on examining the replicability of education research, which I know is a topic in this morning's keynote. And I think that's one area where data science will hopefully have a larger role going forward. In terms of specific funding opportunities, so IES puts out most of their research opportunities through an annual solicitation, one for the National Center on Education Research, one through the National Center on Special Education Research. But they do also offer some off-cycle competitions. They are currently asking for feedback on 3 potential off-cycle competitions, which I wanted to highlight because I think they're some of the most data science applicable opportunities that we've seen from IES in a little while. One using state longitudinal data systems to measure long-term educational outcomes. One using the NAEP, that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress Process data. So this is an exam that students across the country take, and IES, or the Department of Education, I should say, logs every keystroke. They log how much time is taken on each question. So they have a tremendous amount of data, and they want to start using that data to basically draw conclusions about the effectiveness of the NAEP, about testing in general, about educational outcomes. And in the request for more information on this, they specifically said, we hope that this will attract more data scientists to get involved in education research, and more education researchers to get involved with data science. So that's a big one for them, and as well as systematic evaluation of widely math and reading programs. So the Department of Education has a number of interventions that they offer, some of which are scarcely used and some of which are incredibly widely used, and they want to use, take a sort of broader look at, are these effective writ large, and using the data that they collect from teachers who use those interventions to improve math and reading to determine their effectiveness. National Endowment for the Humanities, so hopefully if you're interested in the humanities, you went to this morning's excellent digital humanities session. But despite repeated attempts to shut down the agency from the administration, it's still up and running strong. One of the two things that I want to point out with NIH is they are investing more recently in infrastructure and capacity building, and this includes data infrastructure. So we've seen, these are among the largest grants that NIH has put out to date. And we expect them to continue these solicitations, to run more of them. So it's a great opportunity for any faculty interested in humanities to build up their data infrastructure. They also run a lot of programs out of their Office of Digital Humanities, which encourage humanities researchers to get more involved in using data science to, for text processing across massive amounts of primary source documents, developing new computationally-based methods, techniques, or teaching of humanities faculty, humanists to use data science, particularly relevant to UVA, because UVA is actually the highest funded public university from NIH over the last decade. Fun fact.
So this one's a fall I want to talk about the Department of Justice, just one of those agencies that I think a lot of folks don't think to look to. So we like to highlight those as well. This is again going to kind of be near the end of it. There's just a few key takeaways that they have some solicitations for funding opportunities between December and May pretty much every year. So now is a really good time to look at past priorities and past funding opportunities that might be of interest to you. They have the National Institute of Justice, which is kind of their somewhat more applied, I would say, closest they have like an NSF. So it's more basic and applied, but it's going to be how your research can advance criminal justice. So it could be, say, mapping, what you can be inferred from gun sales in a certain area for a certain crime, or opioids trafficking and kind of who's selling them and in what communities, how that's really kind of permeating through. But also, on the more social science side of things, what are some best practices for kind of thwarting that and stopping that? Human trafficking monitoring is another huge issue for them. These and the Department of Homeland Security, we're going to talk about a little bit more. But again, these are big, broad themes that, of course, data science could be applied to improve. I will say fundamentally between that and the Bureau of Justice Assistance. So this is pretty much where Congress says, hey, Department of Justice, there's a lot of, again, a good example would be human trafficking. That's a problem. Here's a bunch of money to fix it. And find researchers to do it. So in that regard, it would probably go to a state or a local entity or a local law enforcement. You would have to partner with them theoretically through this, but if you have a data application that could kind of help, I think that these are the types of areas that folks should really start to look at. So here are some of the funding opportunities here. So for instance, innovative prosecuting solutions through BJA. It's using data in the development of violent crime strategies and programs and making sure that it's reaching the right communities, and based on what you know about certain communities, what could be more effective, and how this could be replicated, say, at certain inner cities and certain regions kind of across the country. So there's a lot of room for creativity within some of these solicitations, but again, it takes strong partnerships with local law enforcement, either at the state or regional level. And again, they're also looking for areas where really data science could be used for artificial intelligence and community supervision. So millions of Americans right now are released from jail, but also under community supervision. So how this monitoring could be improved, kind of also helping make sure that you're respecting someone's privacy, but also, again, they're under supervision, so making sure that they don't maybe slip up or violate their parole before it kind of happens. So kind of maybe looking into patterns and systems that could be predictive of recurring behavior that they did before, and kind of stopping them at the front end, or at least providing some sort of interventions on the front end, and hopefully stopping these types of crimes before they start. So there's a lot of information on crime mapping that can be done to help prosecutors, but it's just really taking the data within these communities and helping ways to either solve the criminal justice backlog, make it more efficient, or to, again, provide guidance kind of before these things start. And then the Department of Homeland Security, which has a lot more funding than I think a lot of folks can really think. And again, this is just data sciences as it applies to interests of DHS, which, if you can imagine, they are the civilian cybersecurity agency. They are one of the main providers and understanders of drone regulations within the federal government and UAS. Things from screening, there's a ton of money within TSA's research interests to do more for screening, logistics management, kind of across the board. And they have a long-range broad agency announcement, LRBAA, which I strongly encourage really anybody here or in the room to just take a look at. I think that they list out pretty much all of their topics that are interest to them. There are like 120 or so, and I think that folks are surprised when they see it. It's a lot more applied, obviously, but they'll have things like how disasters could be, or humans working with disaster management relief. So, for instance, finding out ways that through patterns from past disasters and disaster management, you can have better systems for evacuation in certain scenarios. And again, it can be applied in different contexts. But I think it's just a really important area to look, and again, they're all listed there. And there's also the Major Centers of Excellence program. They just did one on terrorism prevention, but there's also an ongoing COE on actually using data to improve systems management and decision making within DHS. It's a massive enterprise of several sub-agencies, and making sure that really everyone's on the same page and that they can respond to, say, some catastrophic events or attacks in a timely manner. So while we're not sure when the next one's going to be released, it's probably going to be in either Arctic and marine security, coastal resilience, or explosives, which are very broad areas, but again, they define what they're looking for in each. But in the aforementioned COEs, it's again worth checking out the existing ones, because they have some sub-BAAs where you can apply for those and apply as a partner. And again, there are just some funding opportunities that are just examples of kind of what we're looking at. What they want to look for is some areas, like, and some of these are from the long-range BAA, like cyber risk economics. If you can, say, predict a cyber attack before it happens based on different factors, based on different motivations for doing such an attack. DoD, of course, has an interest when it's a multinational concern. DHS, more domestic attacks. Is there a better way for information sharing? Not just within the government, but among different entities that could be, say, masking the corporate sensitive data that they have, and they want to share information on cyber attacks. You can best understand like the impulses and kind of the patterns. There's a lot of science in just actually bringing those skills together, in addition to kind of making sure that the attacks are prevented. So again, the LRBAA is just a quick thumb through, and if you're interested, you can please reach out to me or Jack. And it's just bill@lewis-burke.com and jack@lewis-burke.com. And again, we're here to answer any questions about big data or any other federal funding questions. That's it.
I know we ran through a ton of material, so we're happy to discuss one-on-one, answer questions, help connect you to other experts in our office who cover specific areas of federal government or federal interest. Generally be a resource.
Can you make those slide bills?
Yeah, I think we're going to try and
have a question, and this is a little bit general, but it is related to the last point about the BAA. And I don't know anything about this BAA, but for example, with DARPA, that I know more about, the way BAAs work is that DARPA, the program manager, works with a handful of people, maybe 10, and they work over several months, if not longer. And they eventually crystallize with the BAA, they release the BAA, and 30 days later, the proposals are due.
Yeah.
So if you are not part of that, nucleus of 10, 15, whatever people, you don't know that that's going on. And by the time it's going on, especially since DARPA, the projects are quite involved, you need to create a team. I mean, it's not, a single PI where you maybe in a month you could do something meaningful. Even if you work in that area, just the logistics of putting together a DARPA proposal take a month. Basically.
Yeah.
So my question is, do you have any, insight into how to break that chicken and egg problem? Is there a way to learn about some of these efforts before the BA is released? And I know they are actually not supposed to talk about them before the BA is released, and after the BA is released, they cannot talk about them either. So that's very frustrating. But
Yeah, absolutely understand that. DARPA, like you said, it's interesting because program officers generally, they come in, they spend time developing one idea, they run that one idea, and then they leave. And so one of the things that we recommend, which Bill mentioned, is engaging with program officers early in some of these industry days. There are limited opportunities to engage with DARPA officers, so traveling to the industry days is a really good opportunity to engage with them, especially the ones who are newer to DARPA, who are sort of beginning their rotations, to really understand the things that they're working on and sort of get in at that ground level, like you mentioned.
And then of course we track the new DARPA program officers kind of as they happen. So of course it's good to get involved when you can. So again, we can give you our card, and if you have any research interest, it's really helpful for us to know, so that when that comes up, or if we hear something from these advisory committees that we go to, we can help connect you. But you're right, DARPA in particular is one you want to get in on the front end, and I will say it is way more, anal and difficult to get into than any of the other BAAs we talked about. So BAA for ONR, you just can have a compelling research proposal in their general area of interest with the program officer. They can talk to you. If they think they can use it, they can fund you.
Yeah,
Same thing with DHS.
A lot of the service branches are more accessible. We also put out several newsletters, as Lewisburg does, that are open to anyone at UVA.
So how do we get those?
If we can exchange emails after, I can make sure that you get it.
That would be useful.
We have one specifically in defense research. So, well, thank you all for coming, and if you have one